Hi everyone, in this video we are going to talk about CSS background properties. Now for the HTML, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create a section. I'm not going to provide anything because all of the styles that are going to come from CSS, and we don't need any content because we're talking about backgrounds. So let's go ahead and let's grab the section. First off, when there is no content, keep in mind that you need to provide it with some height and some width. So the height is 500, let's say the width is 700. In this case, the section can actually be created. Let me make this smaller so we can make this bigger. Let's put it to 800. There we go. And let me provide it with some border. So I'm going to say border 2 pixel. Tomato and solid. Save that. So here is where our section lies within this border. Here is our section. Now, what are different CSS background properties? Now, when it comes to CSS, let me just make this smaller. This is as much as we need. There we go. Now, there are a lot of CSS background properties. We are going to study them one by one. The most important ones, of course. So the first one is background color, which we have talked about a lot. The background color could be a hexadecimal value, a color name, an RGB, or an HSL. So if we say RGBA, 110, 150, 190, and 50% transparent. So this is the background color that we're going to end up. The unit could be different. For example, you could say HSLA, HSL, hexadecimal, doesn't really matter. We have already talked about this a lot, so I'm just going to move past this. Next up, we have background image. So I don't think we have talked about this before. So when you have content in HTML, sometimes you would want to provide your images within the HTML. One of the major differences between a background image and an inline image, an inline image is the kind of image that is provided using an HTML element, is that if that image, you need to keep in mind this. These are design decisions that you need to make before actually starting to create your website. Now, you need to keep in mind that what is the purpose of that image? Is the image an important part of the content of your web page, or is the image just for design purposes? So if the image is an important part of your website, it means that it has to be an inline image. What does that mean? It means that you need to provide it within your HTML page. But if it is just for design and aesthetic purposes, then it has to be a background image. That is one of the main differences between an inline image and a background image. Now, we already know how we can select an inline image, but what about background images? First things first, the path for a background image is the same as for an inline image. If the image is within the same directory as the CSS file, because we're talking about background images, then you just have to write the name of the image as well as the extension of the image. But if the image is in a different directory than the CSS file, you need to first write the name of the directory, then /, then the name of the image with its extension. So, but the syntax is going to be different. Of course, this is CSS. You need to write URL, and within quotes, you need to provide the name of the directory. Since the image is in the images folder, meaning it's in a different directory than the CSS file, we need to provide the name of the directory, and then you need to / and then select the image that you want. So if I save that, here is our image. Now the issue with this image being shown here is that Sniper Sun, let's just go enlarge this. And you can see that this is a very gigantic image. But in here, in our web page, we only see this top left part of it. We don't see the sniper, the sun, nothing. What happened to the image? How can we remedy this issue? Now here are where the other background properties come into place. The first one is going to be background size. Keep in mind, these are extremely useful properties. You're going to use them on a daily basis. Keep that in mind. Now, There are two main property values in background size. The first one is cover. It means that as much area as it has been dedicated for this image, make sure the image covers that area, and as much image that we want, it has to be shown in that area. So if I save that, you can see that we can see a lot more of the image than we saw before. But because images, they have specific height, they have specific aspect ratios. Those aspect ratios, they prevent the image to be fully shown when you're using when you're using the cover property. And you can see that some of the image from the top, some of the image, let me just, how can I go back? Just open it again. Some of the image from the top and a lot of the image from the right, it has been cropped. Why? This has been cropped due to the fact that the image always wants to keep its aspect ratio. And if it loses its aspect ratio, then it doesn't really have to crop anything. That's why the image is like a little bit like cropped, because it wants to maintain its aspect ratio or preserve it. Now, cover means cover the entire parent for which the image has been provided, and don't worry if there are any things missing from the image. There is the other property says, do worry about everything that has been missed, and don't worry about the parent, whether the parent has been covered or not. And that is contain. And you can see that the image on the bottom, it has been repeated twice. It has been repeated again. Because this property value, it contains and it shows the entire image while preserving the aspect ratio. Keep that in mind. The aspect ratio is very important when you're talking about background images and, of course, inline images. Now, this part has been repeated. Now, let's go and we have a background repeat property, and we are going to set it to no repeat. And when we save it, what happened to the bottom of the image? Because the image tends to keep its aspect ratio, it couldn't keep covering this part. If it covered it, then some of the image from the right, and it would be like pulling on the bottom right corner of the image, like grabbing it and pulling it away and stretching the image diagonally. Therefore, some of the image from the right will be deducted and the bottom portion will be covered. But that contain says, keep your aspect ratio, show the entire image, but don't worry if you're not covering the parent. That's what contain says. Cover says, keep your aspect ratio and make sure you cover the parent. Make sure you cover it. It doesn't matter how much of the image we're going to lose. Just cover it. For the most part, I don't remember actually using contain. I just use cover. It doesn't really matter if I lose a little bit of the image. I just want, when I say background image, background size cover, and when I have a background and maybe like some overlay text, I don't want it to be cropped. I don't want the image to not covered. I want the image to cover that. So this is background repeat, and yes, with this, our lecture comes to an end. See you in the next one.